In this video, we will break down the snakes that actually hunted American soldiers, based on documented medical records, herpetological surveys of Vietnam, and veteran accounts from memoirs and interviews. Military medical records show snake bites occurred regularly throughout the war. Some were treated, and the soldier returned to duty. Others required evacuation. Some were fatal. These weren't rare incidents. They were a constant threat that every soldier operating in the jungle had to account for. If you're a veteran watching this, you've probably got a story about snakes. Maybe you saw one, maybe you nearly stepped on one, maybe someone in your unit got bitten. Those memories don't fade. For everyone else, here's what needs to be understood. Vietnam had some of the most venomous snakes on the planet, and they were everywhere. Hanging from trees at eye level, coiled on trails, hiding in equipment. American soldiers faced an enemy they couldn't negotiate with, couldn't call artillery on, and couldn't always see until it was too late. The white-lipped pit viper, universally called the bamboo viper by American soldiers, appears in more Vietnam War literature than any other snake. There's a reason for that. This snake is perfectly adapted to kill in the jungle. Bright green coloration makes it invisible against bamboo and foliage. It's arboreal, meaning it lives in trees and vegetation at exactly the heights where soldiers' hands and faces would be. It sits motionless for hours, waiting. The camouflage is so effective that you can be looking directly at one and not see it until it moves. The species, Trimesurus albolabris, for anyone keeping track, averages 60 to 90 centimeters in length, though some reach over a meter. The fangs are relatively short, but the venom delivery is efficient. What makes this snake particularly dangerous isn't massive venom yield, but the likelihood of encounter. They're common, they're where humans are, and they defend their territory aggressively. Philip Caputo's A Rumor of War describes these snakes as being nearly invisible until you were right on top of them. He wasn't exaggerating. The snake's habit of remaining absolutely still until threatened means soldiers would grab branches for support, push through vegetation, or reach into areas without seeing the viper until after it struck. The venom is hemotoxic. It destroys blood cells and tissue. A bite causes immediate burning pain, rapid swelling, and discoloration around the wound. The affected limb swells dramatically within minutes. Without treatment, tissue necrosis sets in. The flesh dies and turns black. In severe cases, the venom causes systemic effects: internal bleeding, kidney failure, shock. Medical case reports from the war showed bamboo viper bites caused significant casualties. A 1968 Army medical study documented multiple cases requiring evacuation and extended treatment. The study noted that bites to the hands and arms were most common, consistent with soldiers grabbing vegetation and encountering the snakes. With antivenom, the venom continued destroying tissue the entire time. Even if the bite didn't kill directly, the tissue damage could be severe enough to require amputation or cause permanent disability. Night operations made encounters more likely. Bamboo vipers are primarily nocturnal hunters. Units moving through jungle at night would be operating in darkness through territory where these snakes were actively hunting. The snakes would be more alert, more likely to strike at movement, and soldiers couldn't see them even if they'd been visible in daylight. One documented incident from Marine records describes a night ambush position where a Marine was bitten by a bamboo viper that had been hanging in vegetation directly above where he'd set up. The snake bit him on the neck, a particularly dangerous location. He survived, but required immediate evacuation, compromising the entire ambush operation. The psychological impact of bamboo vipers was substantial. Every branch became suspect. Every time a soldier reached out to steady himself or push through vegetation, there was the possibility of a green viper striking from concealment. This constant vigilance added to the mental exhaustion that wore soldiers down over months of operations. The banded crate was a different kind of nightmare. Unlike bamboo vipers that at least gave you a fighting chance if you saw them, crates hunted at night and their bites were often painless initially. These snakes are ground dwellers, typically 1 to 1.5 meters long, with distinctive yellow and black banding. They're nocturnal and relatively docile during the day. You could walk past one and it likely wouldn't react. At night, they become active hunters and they're far more defensive. The venom is neurotoxic and among the most potent of any Asian snake. It attacks the nervous system, causing progressive paralysis. The terrifying aspect of crate bites is that victims often don't realize they've been bitten until symptoms start appearing. The bite isn't particularly painful, maybe feels like a thorn prick, or isn't felt at all. Hours later, the symptoms start. Numbness spreads from the bite site, muscle weakness develops. The paralysis progresses steadily, extremities first, then respiratory muscles. Victims remain conscious while becoming increasingly unable to move or breathe. Without antivenom and respiratory support, death from respiratory paralysis is likely.
Crates would enter defensive perimeters and bunkers at night. Multiple incidents involve soldiers being bitten inside supposedly secure positions. The snakes were hunting rodents and frogs that were attracted to American positions by food waste. Encountering a sleeping soldier, the crate would bite defensively if disturbed. The Poisonous Snakes of the World manual, issued to medical personnel, identified crates as one of the most dangerous species soldiers might encounter. The manual emphasized immediate aggressive treatment, antivenom, monitoring for respiratory failure, preparation for mechanical ventilation if needed. The mortality rate is extremely high. Some sources cite 70 to 80%. Even with treatment, the prognosis depends heavily on how quickly antivenom is administered. In remote fire-based locations or during multi-day patrols, that treatment might not be available in time. Ophiophagus hana, the king cobra, is the world's longest venomous snake. In Vietnam, they can exceed 4 meters, over 13 feet in length. Encountering one was a rare but absolutely terrifying experience. Unlike most cobras, king cobras are aggressive and will pursue threats. They're territorial, especially when guarding nests. A king cobra that feels threatened will raise the front third of its body off the ground, spread its hood, and advance toward the threat while hissing. An adult king cobra raising up can be eye level with a standing human. The venom yield is massive due to the snake's size. A single bite can deliver enough neurotoxin to kill an elephant or 20 to 30 humans. The venom causes rapid onset of paralysis, cardiovascular collapse, and death. Survival without immediate treatment is unlikely. Documented encounters between American soldiers and king cobras are relatively rare, but they happened. Michael Herr's dispatches mentions rumors of king cobra encounters that circulated among troops, though he notes the stories grew in the telling. The Vietnam Archive at Texas Tech University contains accounts from soldiers who encountered these massive snakes. One particularly detailed account from an Army unit describes a king cobra entering a base camp at night and biting a soldier who was walking to the latrine. The soldier survived due to immediate medical treatment, but the incident prompted the unit to conduct a sweep of the area, finding 2 more cobras near the perimeter. The medical challenge with king cobra bites was the sheer volume of venom. Standard antivenom doses that might work for other cobras were insufficient for king cobra envenomation. Multiple vials would be needed, and even then, the prognosis was poor without immediate advanced medical care. Fortunately, king cobras were less common than other venomous species and tended to avoid human-populated areas when possible. Most soldiers never saw one, but those who did remembered it vividly. The image of a massive snake rearing up to eye level, spreading its hood, and advancing toward the threat isn't something that fades from memory. The monocled cobra, Naja cauthia, was more commonly encountered than king cobras and only slightly less dangerous. These snakes average 1.2 to 1.5 meters in length and are found throughout Vietnam in various habitats. The name comes from the distinctive circular pattern on the back of the hood. When threatened, the cobra would rear up and spread its hood, displaying this marking. The defensive display was meant as a warning, but soldiers who didn't heed the warning would be bitten. The venom is primarily neurotoxic, but also contains cytotoxic components that cause local tissue damage. Bites cause rapid swelling, tissue necrosis, and systemic effects, including paralysis and respiratory failure. The mortality rate for untreated bites is significant. What made monocled cobras particularly dangerous was their habitat preference. They adapted well to areas around human habitation, hunting rats and other pests. This meant they were commonly found near base camps, villages, and anywhere Americans were operating. The likelihood of encounter was higher than with species that avoided human activity. The monocled cobra's defensive behavior made them dangerous even when spotted. Unlike most snakes that will retreat if given the opportunity, monocled cobras often hold their ground. If cornered or surprised, they strike quickly and accurately. The strike range is approximately 1/3 to 1/2 the snake's body length, meaning a 1.5-meter cobra can strike from 50 to 75 centimeters away. Deboia russelli, Russell's viper, is responsible for more snakebite deaths in Asia than any other species. In Vietnam, particularly in the Central Highlands, these vipers were common and extremely dangerous. These are heavy-bodied snakes, averaging 1 to 1.5 meters in length, with distinctive chain-like patterns along the back. They're terrestrial and often found in agricultural areas and grasslands, exactly the types of terrain where military operations frequently occurred. Russell's vipers are known for being bad-tempered. They don't retreat readily, and when threatened, they produce an extremely loud hissing sound by forcing air through their nostrils. Chelicelasma rhodostoma, the Malayan pit viper, might be the most underrated killer snake in Vietnam. It caused more documented bites than almost any other species, yet rarely gets mentioned in veteran accounts. The reason for this disconnect is simple. Soldiers often never saw the snake that bit them. Malayan pit vipers are masters of camouflage. They're chunky, ground-dwelling snakes averaging 70 to 90 centimeters in length, colored in browns and grays that make them invisible against dead leaves and forest floor debris. These snakes lie motionless on trails and paths. They don't flee when they detect approaching footsteps like many snakes do. They stay put, relying on camouflage. A soldier walking patrol would step on or very close to the viper, triggering a defensive strike. The bite would be the first indication the snake was even there. A 1969 medical study, conducted at the 24th Evacuation Hospital, documented that Malayan pit viper bites were among the most frequent venomous snake bites treated. The study noted that, in the majority of cases, soldiers reported being bitten without seeing the snake. The identification came later through symptom patterns and, when possible, finding and killing the snake after the bite occurred. The venom is hemotoxic and quite potent. Bites cause immediate severe pain, unlike crate bites, which are often painless. The bitten limb swells rapidly and dramatically. The tissue around the bite turns dark purple or black as the venom destroys blood cells and tissue. Without treatment, necrosis sets in, and the flesh literally rots. The swelling can be extreme enough to cut off circulation. Medical personnel sometimes had to make incisions to relieve pressure, a procedure called fasciotomy, to prevent the limb from being lost due to lack of blood flow. This was emergency field surgery performed in less than ideal conditions. What made Malayan pit viper bites particularly challenging was the tissue damage. Even with antivenom treatment, the local effects of the venom were severe. Soldiers who survived bites often had permanent scarring, loss of muscle function, or in serious cases, required amputation of fingers or toes that had been destroyed by venom. The snakes were most active at dusk and dawn, exactly when many patrol movements and perimeter checks occurred. A soldier walking the perimeter at twilight, checking the wire, would step near a viper line on the path. The strike would be instant, and the soldier wouldn't know what hit him until the pain started. Harold Moore's after-action reports from Ia Drang mention snake bites among the casualties, though specific species aren't always identified. Medical personnel who served in the Central Highlands consistently identify Malayan pit viper bites as common occurrences in units operating in that region. The psychological impact was different from other snake threats. At least with bamboo vipers and trees, soldiers knew to watch where they put their hands. With Malayan pit vipers, there was no effective prevention. You couldn't see them. They were on the ground where you had to walk. Every step was a potential snake bite, and there was nothing you could do about it except hope your next step didn't land on one. Vietnam's coastal waters and rivers contained multiple species of sea snakes. some of the most venomous snakes in the world. For Navy personnel and riverine forces, these were the nightmare swimming beneath the surface. Sea snakes are fully aquatic. They can't move effectively on land, but in water they're graceful and fast. The species found in Vietnamese waters included several from the Hydrophis genus, with the yellow-bellied sea snake being among the most commonly encountered. The venom is primarily neurotoxic and extraordinarily potent, significantly more toxic than most land snakes. A single bite contains enough venom to kill multiple humans. The evolutionary reason is that sea snakes hunt fish, which need to be incapacitated almost instantly or they'll swim away. This requirement has driven the evolution of extremely fast-acting, powerful venom. The good news is that sea snakes are generally not aggressive. They don't attack without provocation. The bad news is that provocation could mean accidentally grabbing one while working on a boat, stepping on one in shallow water, or swimming near one that felt threatened. Brownwater Navy operations put sailors in regular contact with sea snakes. The patrol boats operating in the Mekong Delta and coastal waters would regularly have sea snakes surface near them. Crew members describe seeing them swimming alongside boats or coiled on riverbanks. One documented incident from 1968 involved a sailor who reached into the water to retrieve something and was bitten by a sea snake. The bite itself was relatively painless, just a small puncture. Within 30 minutes, he began experiencing muscle pain and stiffness. By an hour post-bite, he was having difficulty breathing. Emergency evacuation and treatment saved his life, but it was close. The challenge with sea snake bites was the rapid onset of symptoms, combined with the maritime environment. A sailor bitten while on a patrol boat in a remote river or canal might be hours from medical facilities. The venom works quickly. Respiratory paralysis can develop within a few hours of envenomation. Swimmers and divers faced particular risk. Navy SEALs and other personnel conducting underwater operations had to be aware that sea snakes inhabited the same waters. A sea snake encountered underwater could be startled and bite defensively. In murky river water where visibility was measured in inches, you might not see a sea snake until you were right on top of it. The riverine warfare environment created unique snake encounter scenarios. Sailors who fell overboard, personnel conducting river crossings, anyone working in or near the water faced potential sea snake encounters. The snakes were curious and would sometimes approach humans, investigating them as potential threats or prey. Medical treatment for sea snake bites required significant antivenom doses. The potency of the venom meant that standard snakebite protocols weren't sufficient. Respiratory support was critical. Many sea snakebite victims required mechanical ventilation while the antivenom took effect and the venom was metabolized. The psychological impact on riverine forces was significant. Treating snake bites in Vietnam's combat environment presented unique challenges that often determined whether soldiers survived. Antivenom was available, but in limited quantities at forward positions. The standard antivenom was polyvalent, effective against multiple species. But identifying the snake was helpful for determining how much antivenom to administer and what supportive care would be needed. Transport time was critical. A soldier bitten in a remote fire base or during patrol might be hours from a field hospital with adequate medical supplies. During that time, venom continued destroying tissue and affecting organ systems. Dust-off helicopters would prioritize snakebite evacuations when possible, but weather, enemy fire, or other casualties could delay extraction. The Poisonous Snakes of the World Handbook was issued to medical personnel, but correctly identifying snakes from descriptions or from seeing the snake briefly wasn't always possible. Treatment often proceeded on the basis of symptoms rather than confirmed snake identification. Soldiers were taught basic first aid for snake bites. Immobilize the limb, keep it below heart level, and get to medical care immediately. What they weren't taught to do was attempt to kill and bring the snake for identification, as this often resulted in additional bites. The dead snake photos some medics took were for educational purposes and post-treatment confirmation, not for immediate treatment decisions. The psychological component of snake bites was significant. Soldiers who were bitten often panicked, which increased heart rate and potentially spread venom faster. Medics had to calm casualties while simultaneously treating them and arranging evacuation. Understanding the snake threat helps explain why Vietnam veterans talk about watching where they stepped, checking their gear constantly,
and never fully relaxing even in supposedly secure areas. The threat was real, it was constant, and it came from an enemy that didn't care about politics or war. It just defended itself when threatened. If you're a veteran, you already knew all of this. Thanks for watching and thanks for your service. For everyone else, if you found this valuable, hit that like button. Check out our other videos on Vietnam. We've covered everything from feared weapons to wildlife threats, to the unconventional moments that define the war. Subscribe if you want more documented history that goes beyond the sanitized version. We're committed to telling the real stories with real sources. And drop a comment. Whether you're a veteran with your own snake story or just learned something new, we want to hear from you.